Welcome to Developer Service YouTube channel. On today's video, we're going to be building applications with Flet. And what is Flet? Flet is a multi-platform way of building apps that is powered by Flutter. So it enables developers to build both web, mobile and desktop apps in Python. No front-end experience is required. So the main features is it has a very simple architecture. It has everything included. It is powered by Flutter. And Flutter is Google's framework for building very beautiful, not just mobile applications, but cross-platform applications. So Flet is powered by Flutter. Can be used with any language. In this case, we're going to be building with Python. And like I mentioned, can be delivered to any device. So we can deploy the web app to show in the browser. We can package as a standalone app for a desktop app for Windows, Mac OS or Linux. And it can also be installed in mobile as a PWA. And can be then, of course, in iOS and Android. So now that you know a little bit how it is Flet, we're going to be covering a lot of its features, since basic text display to asynchronous API calls. So let's get into the code and see how we can use Flet. So if we take a quick look at documentation, we see that, for instance, for installing Flet on Windows, of course, as always, the recommend is that you have a virtual environment. But if we scroll down, we see that for Windows, everything that we need to do is do the pip install Flet with all, and all installs all the necessary dependencies. So we do the pip install Flet with all the dependencies I've already installed. In case you will need to install it, of course, and it will install all the necessary libraries for Flet and Flet itself. So how can you build an application with Flet? And we start by importing Flet as FT. As convention, we use the FT. So we define, in this case, we are defining a function that will act as the main page. So you have this def main, which receives a Flet page, and that will be the main page. We'll see that that is run when we run the Flet app, and the target is that main function, which means that it's the main application that we want to run. So we start by configuring the page. So we receive this page as a parameter, which is a Flet page. So we configure the title, the vertical alignment and horizontal alignment, both of them are centered. So that means that whatever we're going to be showing in the app, it's going to be centered, both vertical and horizontal. We are going to be creating a small text widget that we're going to be stored in the variable hello text. So that will be from text widget, so from FT text. It will receive a value, which is be the text that we are going to use, the size, the weight of the font, which in this case is going to be bold, and the color of the font, which will be, or the text, which will be blue. And then we add this to the page, and we add the hello text to the page, and that is how we can build a very simple application with Flet. If we run this application, we can see we have our hello Flet and the text widget that we just saw, and the corresponding text, it is centered both horizontal and vertically. That's how we can build the most simple application with Flet. But of course, an application is nothing if it cannot interact with the user. So for our second example, we are going to see how we can have a button on the page and interact with the button by handling the click button. So in this case, we're going to be building a little bit different. We import our Flet as FT as usual. We're going to be creating a class that will represent our main application, or the main content that we want for the application. That class is going to have an init, and on the init we're going to be saying that the messages we want to show in the button, it's going to be an FT text, press the button, and we're going to be defining that the click button is an elevated button. Elevated button is a button in Flet that has a bit of inbox, and that shows that visual display. The text is going to be click me, and we're going to be handling the click by the onClick property that we're going to assign to the self button click, which is the function that we are defining here next. So when there's a non-click on the button, it will call this function button click. This function, obviously, it's inside this class, so it has the self. It receives an event, which is an FT control event, so control event from Flet. Doesn't return anything. So we handle that event by storing our message variable with the button has been clicked, and we also update our message text with we update our message check with that text that has been clicked. The define build, that is a standard from Flet, and it means that this component That's the way that this component is going to be built, and we're saying that it returns a column. That's how we want this custom component, which is we are creating here with this button click up. It's a custom component, so we're going to be saying that it returns a column. So we're returning that column, and inside that column we can have several different controls, and we're going to have the message, which is the text widget, and we're going to have the click button, which is the button. So these are part of the controls. So that means this column will have two of these controls, which is the text and the button. Alignment is center, and horizontal alignment is center. So that means both vertical and horizontal is going to be center, and we have a space between the two of them with 20. Now, as we saw before, we are defining our function for the main page that of course receives a page. We are setting the page title, which is about the click event, and we're also saying that whatever component we put, in this case our custom component, it's going to be centered both vertical and horizontal in the center. So then we instantiate our button click, and that is going to be our main app, so to speak, and then we add that to the page, and as what we do page.add, and we are doing as before, we are calling the app.build, that as I mentioned, that's the way that we build as a convention in Flet, that we build the custom widgets. We're calling the app build, which is going to be building this custom widget, going to be building this interface, and is going to add that to the page. And of course we run our app with the ft app with the target, that the main function that we just saw. So if we run the code, we see we have again our application with the button click event as the title. We have the two widgets, the press the button in the click me, the text, and the button. You see the button has a small shadow when it clicks. That's all part of the elevated button. And so if I go and click the button, we see that the text changed to the button click because we're handling that on click event where we are changing the message of the box. So that's how we can interact with the user in terms of buttons and button clicks. So as we start adding more and more components to a Flet application, we're going to need to start thinking how to organize the layout. And for that, Flet has several different possibilities. So as usual, we import our Flet, we define our main function that we will be calling later on with the app, which the target is main. So we define our main page, receive the page, we set our title, vertical alignment, horizontal alignment, and the padding for all the components that we're going to put inside. We create different controls that we're going to be adding to the page. We have a header, which is a text that says welcome to Flet. We have a subheader, which is also from a text widget. Building layouts is easy, that's going to be the value. You're going to see that one has size 24, the other 16. One has the font weight bold, and the other has a color gray. And gray 500 means one of the shades of gray. Then we can create a row of buttons, and this is where we start organizing the layout. So first we start by defining a row. So we use ft.row. We're defining a row that we start the row buttons. So the row is going to have several different controls. So it's going to have an elevated button, which is going to be the left button, and another elevated button, which is going to be the right button. So we're creating a row of buttons. One will also have the arrow back, and the other one the arrow forward. The alignment in terms of the row, it's going to be centered, and the spacing between the buttons is 20. And then we can create the main column layout. So we're defining a column, which is part of the layout. That's one way to define layout. So you have rows and we have columns. So first we've defined the row, now we're defining the column. So in the controls that we want to add there, it's the header, as we saw before, the subheader, and this row of buttons. So we're adding two widgets and the row to the column. The alignment is center for both horizontal and vertical, and the spacing of 20 between them. And of course we add this layout or this column to the page, and that will create our application if we run the code. And we can see we have our Flet layout example. We have our header, welcome to Flet. We have our subheader, building layouts is easy. And we have our row of buttons, left and right buttons. We didn't associate any on click. And we have our row of buttons. So you can see we define a row with the buttons. We define a column with welcome to Flet, building layouts, and with the buttons. So both horizontal and vertical ways of building layouts in Flet. So now that we saw how to add layouts, let's talk about list views. And list views are very useful in Flet or any other application to show a list of items. So as usual, we import our Flet, we define our main page, we set the title, we set the theme, which is going to be the light mode, and we set the padding for all the items that we're going to be adding to the page. Then we're going to be creating the controls. First of all, we start with our ListView. ListView is a standard component from Flet. We're going to be expanding so that it uses all the space when whichever container it's inserted in, and with padding, with spacing of 10 and padding of 20. We're going to be defining a local variable of counter to keep track of how many items or the index of the item that we'll be adding to show different items in the list. We have defined a function. We're going to define a function add item that adds one item to the list. So we start by saying that the counter value that we before is non-local, so to keep it local to this function, and we're going to be incrementing that or to using inside this function. We're going to be incrementing it every time that we add an item. So then still inside the add item function, because the add item function is actually the function that returns the widget that we want to show in each of the list items. So we define inside that function, we define the function corresponding to removing an item. In that case, we from the list view, from the several different available controls, we are going to be removing that particular item container, which we just added to the page, which we see that we're defining later on, and we update the page, of course. So what is that item container? That item container is actually the container that will have all the controls that we're going to be showing as an individual item to the list view. So we define that as a container, and the container is just, like it mentioned, a container, so it's one of the layout components. So the content of that, we are going to be doing it as a row, because we are going to be showing the different controls there inside the row. So it's going to be having the text, which is just, you can say that it's the item X that has been added to the list view. I'm going to be expanding so that it uses all the size available, and we'll also be adding that inside the row button. That button is going to have the icon of delete. It's going to be red, and the on-click function of the button will call this remove item that we defined before, and it will also have a tooltip of delete item. So this whole container represents one item and represents one row, and when we click on this row, it will remove itself, so it will remove that container from the list view. And then of course you can define additional properties, the alignment of the different controls inside the row. It's a space between, that means it's going to push both to the left and to the right. And background color, we're going to be defining a shade of blue, padding, and we're doing a little border radius also, so it looks better on the screen. And so as we are building this list view, we're going to be appending this item container every time that we call the add item. So the add item prepares the container knows how to remove an item with a remove item, and then this container is added to the list view, to the controls of the append, it's added to the list, and we update the page. Then we define a create button, that's what's going to be allowing us to click on something to add an item to the list. That's going to be a filled button, that means that it's the whole color is filled. That's going to be add an item. The on click is going to be calling that the function that we just saw, add item, and the icon is going to be an add. So we're going to be adding both of these controls to the page, and this is our main layout. Before we saw the layout for one particular list view item. So we add to the page, we add a column with the different controls, the add button and the list view, and expanding to occupy the whole layout. If we run this code, we see you have our add item button. We have also list view, which you're not seeing because it doesn't have any elements. But if I click add item, we add our first additional item. So you can see this is the whole item container. So it has the text and it has the button. Obviously I can click on the button, see it has the tooltip delete item, but I can add a couple of more items, item 1, item 2, that is the counter variable that you're using. You see the different item containers, and if I click on the delete, it will remove that entire container from the list view. And that's how we can work with the list view in Flet. So for our next example, we're going to be seeing how we can display a modal dialog on Flet, and modal dialog normally is used to either show some particular information or to ask a particular question or answer for the user. So as usual, import our Flet, we define our main function, we add that as the main target to the Flet page. So we have our page, and we define a show dialog function that's used by this open dialog button. So we add this button that is inside the main page. It's an elevated button with the text open dialog, and the on click is going to be calling that show dialog, and we add that open dialog button to the page. So basically the page will have a button, and that is you will open the dialog. So defining how we show the dialog, defining the show dialog function, we create an alert dialog. It has a title, which is a text widget, alert dialog. as the content, which is also text. So a dialog can have other widgets as its components. In this case, we're adding a text widget. The actions that will appear in the dialog, so the buttons that appear at the bottom of the dialog. In this case, we're going to be having a text button and that just says close. And of course, the on-click is just going to be calling the page close to close that dialog. And that dialog is the alert dialog that we are storing in the variable. The actions alignment, so the alignment of the button is going to be at the end, so it's going to be looking beautiful in the dialog. And of course, it's modal, meaning that it shows up on top of everything else and does not allow the user to interface with any of the other UI in the page until it closes the dialog. And how do we open the dialog? We open the dialog by calling page open with the dialog that we just saw as the input, and that will show the dialog in the page. If we run the code, we see we have our application with the open dialog, and if I click on the open dialog, it shows the dialog with the hello dialog as the header, and the body the other text. This is the modal dialog, and we saw the button. It's a text button, so it just says close, and it's aligned to the end of the dialog. And if I click, it closes the dialog. That's how we can implement a dialog, in this case a modal dialog in Flet. So we can also create simple animations in Flet, and this is what this example is going to be about. So first, as usual in Flet, we define our main page, which is added when we run this application as target as a main target. So let's see how we can do the animation. So inside our main page, as usual, we define the page properties, title, alignment, padding. We create a container that is going to be where we're going to be performing our animation. So we create a container with a particular width and height. Background color is a shade of amber. It has a little border radius. And inside, we are defining this container can have an animation, and the animation is in and out. And we're going to see what that represents. We're going to be defining a toggle container function, which is going to be changing the size of this container. So basically, we're going to be animating this container. So every time that we click, it changes the width and the height. So if the width was 100, it changes to 200. If not, then that means it was 200, changes back to 100, and also changes the color of the container from blue to amber. And of course, updates the page so that we can see the changes in the container. So this container that we're going to be adding to the page, it will have an on-click. So in Flet, not just buttons can have a click. A container can also have an on-click event. We'll be calling this toggle container. That's going to be changing the size of the container, which, given that it has an animation, it will animate as it changes this size. And then we just add this container to the page with the page add as before. If we run this code, we see we have our container, which is initially the amber and with a smaller size. And if we click, it goes to the bigger size and changes to blue and animates. And if I click again, it goes back. And so we can see this in and out animation as defined in the property animation. And this is how we can do simple container animations, for instance, but simple animations in Flet. So another way to organize content in Flet, and very usual in most applications, we can have tabs. So this is, we're going to be showing the example of how to work with tabs. Again, import Flet, we define the main page, and the main page we add it as the target of the application. And so let's see how we create the tabs. We set our title for the page and our theme and our padding. We're going to be defining an handle for an event, which is going to be when we change different tabs. And we're going to be printing that we have selected a particular tab and that will receive an event, and that from that event selected index, we're going to be saying that we have just selected a tab. So it's just going to be printing to the terminal that that event has happened, and we're going to be updating the page. And so we created the tabs. So first we create the home tab, which has an icon, so you can define already an icon in the tab. So we have home tab with an icon. Inside we're going to be adding a container, and this container is going to be having the text as the content, going to be aligning in the center and the padding. Going to be adding a second tab, which will be calling profile, which is an icon of a person. Another container has the content, and this will be also having a text saying this is your profile. And the third tab is going to be calling it settings. It has a settings icon and also a container with the text inside. And now we create the tab bar, and the tab bar is what aggregates all the tabs and allows us to interface with the different tabs. So we're going to be creating our tab bar, which is tabs. As so before, we are creating one individual tab. Now we're creating tabs, which is the tab bar itself. So select the index, meaning it's first default selected tab is the first one. I'll do a slight animation when we click on the different tabs. I'm going to be expanding to occupy the whole page. And I'm going to be saying what is the tabs that we have inside. It's going to be the tabs that we defined before, the tab 1, tab 2, and tab 3. And when there's a change event, meaning when we change different tabs, what we're going to call this tab change, as we saw before. And we're going to be printing, not just the tab is going to be changing on the screen, but we're also be printing that into the terminal, saying that we have changed the tab. And of course, we have that tab bar. We add that tab bar to the page. Let's run the code. As you can see, we have our different tabs with very beautiful icons, very easy and very beautiful tabs that we can build with Flet. So by default, we start on the home. If I click profile, we see that little animation that from sliding the page, and go to the settings tab. And if I go to the terminal, you can see that it's selected tab 1 when I select the profile, selected tab 2 when I select the settings. And if I go back to the profile, go back to the home page, again, select the tab, moves those events. So this is how we very easily can build tabs, not just very easy, but also very visual appealing, building tabs in Flet. So of course, the main goal of a page is to interface with the user, as we saw with the button clicks, but also any application normally needs to collect some information from the user. So this example, we're going to be showing the forms and how we do input with forms, and of course how we validate also the forms. So as before, we define our main page. We configure our page with the title, alignments, and paddings. We're going to be defining our different form fields. We're going to start with the name field, which is a text field. We have our label, we have our width, it has a hint. We're also having an icon. Autofocus means that once we open this page, it will be having the focus on this widget. And when there is a change on this text field, it's going to be calling the function validate form. We define our email field, so we're going to be having the name and email as fields. Our email field is very similar. It has an icon email, and when there's a change on the content, it will call the validate form also. We are going to be creating a container for the error message, which is just a text with red, and it initially is not visible. Success container, text with green, which is also initially not visible. We define our validate form function, which of course first it starts by resetting all the messages, then it validates the name. So if the name field is not filled in, it says name is required, otherwise there's no error text for the name field. Then we validate the email. If there's no email, so it needs an email is required. If it doesn't have an at, then it's going to be our very basic validation for the email. It's going to be saying that we need to enter a valid email. Otherwise, everything is okay. And of course, we update our page to show these messages on the screen. We define our submit. That of course also calls the validate form, so not just on change, but when we submit or validate in the form. So if everything is correct with the name and email field, or if there is any error text, then we're going to be saying that we need to correct the errors above, and of course we're going to be showing the error text and the success text as part of the messages. Otherwise everything is okay, and we just say that hello, your email is the corresponding email that I fill in, and this is part of the success that's going to be made visible, and we clear the form. And of course we update the page. So we define our form fields, which the name and email. Of course we need to have a way to submit the form. So we create our submit button, which is an elevated button, which should be on click of this button is going to call the submit function we just saw. And the icon is going to be a send, and we're just styling it a bit with some white and blue as color in the background. We define our form, which is basically a column, a layout column. So our form, the first component or the first control is the text, just to say to fill in the form. Then we have our components that we defined before, our name, email, the submit button, and the error and success messages. We space them at 20, and our horizontal alignment is going to be a center, so in the center of the application. And we add this form, which is our column, which is our main layout, to the page. So if we run this, we see we have our very beautiful form with the icon for the name, the icon for the email. We say fill out the form. If I start filling in the mail, the components is going to be calling the onChange. So the onChange is validating both fields. So in this case, one component is correct. If I delete this one, then I need to enter the name, and if I enter the name, I need to also use the requirement. So if I go to the email is required, so if I go and I do my email, which has very basic email validation, but if I fill in both components, and if I click submit, I say download no, then this email is here. It matches all the items. If I click here and I try to submit, it's going to be saying that I need to correct the errors above. So this is how you can build, very easily built, and very beautiful, easy way to build a form, and with the built-in validations and error messages can be presented to the user. So this is how we can create a form in Flet. So for the next example, we're going to be seeing how we can create a timer for incrementing a little counter. So sometimes you might have some background component that you want to run, or some interface that you want to be running, or some API call or something like that, which we'll also see in the next example. But for now, let's just see a simple basic timer example at threading. So we define our main page. We set all the different properties, the title, the alignment, the padding, the theme. We store a count variable that we're going to be incrementing. We create a widget for the text, and we'll be showing that value, and that value is going to be the string value of the count. We define the size, and the font weight is bold, and of course we're saying that this page is running, so until it's going to be incrementing the timer until we stop it. We define our update counter function, which will be able to use the count function. So while it is running, as we defined before, we increment the count, we update the text of the widget, we update the page, and then we sleep for 1 second, and it counts every single second for the page. If there's some sort of error, we just print to the terminal that there was an error updating the counter. Then we create a container, so we have a bit better organized layout. We create a counter container, which is the container, and the content is that text field that we just saw, the padding and the border radius, and the shade of blue as the background. Then to make it more center, we create a main column when you see that the control is the counter container, and then we align this column center, or the content of this column as center and horizontal. We start the timer as a separate thread, so we are using the threading and we're creating a new thread. The target is the update counter function that we just saw before, that increments the counter. We set it as daemon equals true. That means that this thread will stop when the main thread stops. So in this case, when we close the application, this thread will also stop. And we start the thread, which will be calling the update counter. We add the main column to the page, and we define an on-close event so that we can clean up when the page is closed, and that will be able to change the non-local and the running, and that will change it to false, so that the while loop stops, and as the while loop stops, the daemon and the threading also stops. And we add this on-close event to the page, and that's how we define our timer. So let's run the application. You see we have our timer that is running every second. It waits 1 second and then gets incremented, and this is running asynchronous because I can move, and you can see that the application is still responsive. I can maximize it, and it continues to count. So that's how we can create a timer in Flex. So as our final example, we're going to be seeing how we can asynchronously call an API, and we're going to be using that by using the synchronous HTTP library and also async IO. You will need to do the pip install IO HTTP if you have not yet installed that. So we're defining an async main page. So in Flet we can define synchronous or asynchronous main targets. In this case, our main target is going to be an async function. So we're going to be having a button that is the click that we can do. We're going to be having a counter, and we're going to be downloading some data. So we're going to be also simulating a small network delay, just so that we can see it downloading. So we have our async download data, which is actually going to be downloading from the API. So it will wait 5 seconds to simulate that network delay, as I saw. We called an async client session from the AO HTTP. And with that async session, we're going to be getting from this example API, the JSON placeholder, and calling one of those to-dos there as example. we'll be validating the response status. In this case, if all good, we're going to be waiting for the JSON of the page. We're going to be putting that in the data variable, and the new value that we want to show is going to be that downloaded data. If there's an error, I'm going to be saying that it failed to download the data. And of course, if there's an exception, we're also saying that that new value was an error. So that the result text, we update the value to the new value, we update the page, and that's going to be showing the updated information into the page. So we have, so this is the actual, we did before, this is what actually downloads the data, but then we need to have something that starts the actual download. So we have this async function start download, and that will update the text to say that we are going to start the upload. It will update the page, and we will start the async task, which is the actual download the data task that we just saw. So that will start asynchronously. And we also have the function increment counter, which we're actually not using at this moment in time. And so we have our download button, and that is an elevated button which downloads from the API, and that is going to be on click we start the download. And we're going to be ignoring our content button for now. That we're going to be adding to the page. We add our download button, our result button, our counter button, and our content text button, and we add that all as components. And if we run that, so you see we have our download API. We can click the button to download, and to show that that we are in fact doing it asynchronously, we can increment this counter to see the response of the UI. So if I click download data, we are simulating, and I can increment while that async function is loading. I can be interfacing with the UI, and we have downloaded the data, and we are showing that that data as an example there. So this is how we can do asynchronously functions into Flet, and that's 10 examples of how you can build different parts of an application with Flet to show you the possibilities. If you like this content, like this video, subscribe for more content about Python, Django, AI, and Flet, why not? So until next time, happy coding!